Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Way We Grow podcast, a production of the Craft Growers Network. I'm your host, Nick Wolfe. Today, our guest is Jason Lampman, owner and operator of State 3 Farms and Lampland Farms. State 3 Farms is a small batch craft cannabis farm. They're one of the micro tiers in Oregon. I first heard about Jason over Instagram because this guy's winning all sorts of awards. And, I really wanted to get him on the podcast just to talk about, running a small batch farm. I think you've even told me that it's like the smallest micro tier farm in Oregon, which, winning 11 plus awards is really impressive no matter what size farm you have. But doing it all at a small, where you're basically doing everything yourself, it's super impressive. So Jason, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself and the farm.
Thanks. Well, like you said, I own and operate the smallest grow in Oregon, probably the country, but we don't have a way of really finding that metric. It's with the way that they store data and everything for grows state by state, but I'm pretty sure there's not many people larger than us. I actually just opened another grow in Salem, just up the road here, kind of between us, and it's called Prism Farms, and that's the second smallest grow in Oregon. So I got the two smallest ones in Oregon. Just trying to stick to that micro tier model. I am also a traditional farmer, but we also do, I guess, micro tier traditional farming. We have like a really small, we live on just over an acre here in Oregon, out in Yamhill County. And we do, market veggies. We've got a small 15 by 50 hoop house for veggies, and we do hemp starts there. We're the smallest hemp farm as well.
That's cool.
We have 5 hazelnut trees and 5 walnut trees. So we're probably the smallest hazelnut orchard in Oregon too that sells commercially.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, farming. I fell in love with it, and I love farming, and I think we all kind of have dreams of running businesses and doing what we love on a big scale. I think that's just kind of part of our culture here in the United States, and I kind of started out just kind of following my dreams and my passions, and realized through working with other businesses and working for myself that each industry needs all sizes. So a lot of times people will try to, at these events or online as well, be like, it's us against them. It's us against. It really isn't, though. It's really, the industry needs all sizes. If everybody was a micro tier, I don't know if it would work. If everyone was a tier 2, I don't know if it would work. If everybody was a commercial ag grower, it's just not feasible to grow heirloom tomatoes, for example, or some of the crazy crops. What else do we like? I'm looking out here. I can see small purple potatoes. Nobody's going to grow those on a commercial scale, but I can do it in my 25 by 25 potato patch and bring those to market or to a local CSA. Yeah. I guess the question was, were you asking just kind of what my, more of an explanation?
Well, I mean, that was a great little introduction. I mean, it's what's on your mind right now, and that's kind of how I like to start the show, is just to kind of like open it up, find out what you're thinking about, and, a small batch of everything is really cool. I think that there's a huge niche market for that across the country, where a lot of people do like to know their farmer, and not just for their cannabis, but for everything else that they're putting into their body. And, I spent a lot of time in Napa Valley cooking and going to school there, and there was a lot of this small batch sort of nature to certain aspects of the culinary industry, where people would want, I got this item from this farmer and this item from this farmer, and
Yeah.
that's like what they do. And it's really cool to hear that you have your hands in a lot of different things, where you're not just focusing on cannabis, but you have your farm as well, where you're providing produce and nuts and all these different things that you are producing in a small patch all year. That's really cool. But I do like to kind of take it back even further. So tell us about some of your first experiences with growing plants in general. Did you start growing cannabis? Did you start, growing veggies and stuff with mom and dad when you were growing up? Where did it start, and how did it evolve into this passion for farming?
Yeah, well, let's see here. I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin, and
Okay.
my parents, we had there was a small raspberry patch and a small potato patch, and it wasn't something that was it wasn't something that was really like, my parents both worked, but it wasn't something that was, farming was a thing. I'm very much a first generation farmer, but I don't remember a time of not planting flowers or planting some, just the springtime. It was kind of just a springtime activity. It's spring, let's plant. Winters are hard in Wisconsin, and
Yeah.
the springtime is, a time to kind of redo the pots, and around the house, and maybe plant some fruits or veggies. Nothing really on the scale of homesteading or anything like that, but that's a really good question, because just thinking about it right now, there's not really a time that I don't remember in the spring. There was no fear of plants or anything
For sure.
for me, or it just feels very comfortable. And it was never, pushed, or never a main focus. But so there was always just kind of, potatoes, or I remember a raspberry patch. I do
For
remember
sure.
that, and it was only probably 14 plants, but I remember they were like, if you got your fingers on it, it would hurt your fingers when we were little
Yeah.
kids. And and just, spring flowers. But yeah, that was, I guess there was always some plants in my life. That's a really good question.
Well, it's, for so many people, they have this thing where it seems to be one or the other, where they either, they grew vegetables and then they started growing cannabis, or they, didn't do any gardening at all, and then they're like, oh, I can grow my own fucking pot. And so they start growing weed, and then they're like, I can grow vegetables too. And then they start doing that too. And it seems to be one or the other. And it sounds like for you that, there were always vegetables growing. It was just part of like the tradition of your household, where, in springtime, when it comes, especially in Wisconsin, where winters are so hard and everything starts blooming so heavily in spring,
Yeah.
like all at once, it's like, got to get outside and do stuff, get in the soil and just start to plant stuff. I totally get that. That's an awesome sort of like origin story of where gardening comes from for you, where it's not even necessarily something where you like were intentionally gardening. It was just always there.
Yeah. It's, in the place I grew up in a place called Door County, Wisconsin, and it's a lot of cherry trees and a lot of apple trees around there. And so like you said, the springtime just is a there's just this awakening in the spring of
Sure.
everyone's coming out, and there's lots of apple blossoms, lots of cherry blossoms, and you can live when you live or go past a cherry orchard, and it's just blossoming. You can really it's the I guess it would be terpenes or whatever it is, but you can
Sure.
really smell it. It's pretty amazing, and I'll get that smell. I mean, I was actually, we'll talk about this I'm sure later. I was down by the Capitol the last few months, giving testimony for different rules and laws, and they have a bunch of cherry trees in Salem, and I was walking actually into there, and I got a whiff, and just the smell really brought me back to it was just a moment thing, but this conversation is reminding me of it. But I was walking to the Capitol, there was a bunch of cherry trees. I got a whiff, and I looked around, and I was like, oh my gosh, and just had a memory of just
Sure.
springtime in Wisconsin. So that's pretty funny.
Yeah, smell memories are so cool. Or taste memories too, where it just brings you back that experience where you're like, boom, instantly return to it. It makes me think of the scene in Ratatouille where the critic that's like, he has the ratatouille and it brings him back to being a little kid. I'm always
Yeah.
like, oh, It's so touching.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
But yeah, dude, that's awesome. And so, growing up with you always were gardening, so I'm sure that there was a style of gardening that you were used to. Did your when you were doing these flowers and sort of the different like potato patches and stuff like, and the raspberries, were you aware of how your parents were taking care of these gardens, or were you helping them at all with anything
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that?
it was, water them. And it was really just buying compost and probably Miracle Grow bags from the hardware store. Honestly, it was,
Sure.
I mean, this is like late 80s, early 90s. And then, I moved around high school age, middle school, high school age. I moved up to, that's when I actually moved to where I said Door County, and it was more, that was more in the woods and everything. And it was just, kind of just whatever was available, but I mean, I don't know if I don't know. I guess I don't know much about your history, but there was like it seems that back in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't, even when I first started in the cannabis industry, there was people using Miracle Grow, or there was like this blue powder that was like, I don't even know if I know the NPK of it, but it was just this blue powder, and you mixed it with water, and it was probably like 30 or something ridiculous. It was like,
Yeah, I think I remember my mom putting that in like just cut flowers and stuff
yeah,
like that on the
yeah,
counters. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of what was available was that like commercially, I guess not even commercially, but like at Home Depot or
yeah.
Osh, or
Mhm.
something like that, you would just go in and buy fertilizer. And if it was like, they'd have like the few fertilizers that like Miracle Grow or something that you could dissolve in water and water
Yep.
your house plants with, or it was like chicken manure
Yeah,
or
exactly. Totally.
steer manure, or like there wasn't, like we have things like down to earth now, which I'm
Yes.
sure were available then, but like in such small amounts, or like maybe limited in terms of where it was available. And now that stuff's like available everywhere, and you can actually feed your gardens really easily with really healthy amendments. But I don't, yeah, the 90s were an odd time for home gardeners. I feel
Yeah, I
like
mean,
the
I just,
salt
I,
steaks were the
yeah,
ones
yeah,
that
the
I always.
steak, totally. There, I was just in Wilco, the farm stores here in Oregon, and I just noticed they had 40-pound bags, 50-pound bags of down to earth, and there was a section of worm castings and compost, just pallets, and of course they have their 50-pound bags of commercial ag
Sure.
fertilizers and everything. But it's I mean, it's here. It's the availability of whatever you need is right here, even at a store like Wilco. That's a
Yeah.
farm store. It's really accessible now. It's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. So, when did you first sort of gain interest in cannabis then? If it wasn't your first plants that you were growing, did you encounter it first as a user or as a grower?
I had an older sister, so
Okay.
and she was my best friend, and so I always looked up to her, and she would let me. She was so cool. She'd let me hang out with her and her friends. Never really pushed anything on me or anything. But one time we were just in growing up in rural Wisconsin. One time we were you just go and hang out and blast music out in the woods. And
Sure.
one time these guys it was like this old Pontiac blue, they called it the boat, and open up the trunk, and there was a steamroller that was like the size of the trunk, and these guys, you know, they were like they were smoking it, and I was really intrigued. I was like, oh my gosh, and my sister at this point, she didn't live in the house, so I was just hanging out with her and her friends, like feeling really cool, listening to,
Sure.
I remember the song was like, it was Led Zeppelin, and they they're smoking, and they were like, "Do you want to take a hit?" And so I look over and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I was like, I really, really wanted to, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I should do this, and my my sister just says, and I was like, and so, you know, I was so big that I had to have someone hold the end of it, and I take, I don't know, 2 or 3 rips off of this thing and can barely clear it, and I believe on the third exhale, it was just like this rush over me, and all of a
Sure.
sudden I can hear, like, it's kind. I mean, I would. When you see like I don't know, like the Yellow Submarine cartoony, like, it was just like, it was that like psychedelic. It was so crazy. I was like, I couldn't believe that that I was in the real world and that I could experience the world like this. And
Sure.
I could hear Jimmy Page's guitar, like it was like right next to me, and I was like, and I remember just being so amazed, and just sitting there and just soaking in the world, and being like, wow, this is, because you hear about, I this was in the 90s, in school they're still telling you that drugs are bad, and that if
Yeah.
you smoke pot, that you will get addicted to drugs and you're gonna die. Like,
Yeah.
that was the narrative back then. And
How old were you then?
I was 13 years old.
For sure.
you know, and so it was like, but and that didn't, and so a crazy thing that happens with, which I think is typical of cannabis users, is you smoke it, and then all of a sudden you're like, this doesn't feel bad. This
No.
doesn't seem like it's going to ruin my life. It actually made me feel like I had been missing out on my whole perspective of life. Is what, and at 13 years old, it's a lot, and
Yeah.
and so it was an awesome experience. And then my sister, she's like, oh my gosh, it's so late, you got to go home. And I was like, what? And so she drives me home, and she parks at the end of the driveway, and she's like, get out. And I said, what? I was like, you're not coming? She's like, I'm not going in there. She's like, you're probably going to be in so much trouble. And and my parents they were not happy, and they knew.
For sure.
They didn't ride me too hard, and they talked to me the next day.
Your sister was somewhat of a buffer there too. Even if she didn't show up, it's still, wait, so how'd you get back? Oh, sister dropped me off, and they're like, oh, god damn it.
Yeah, they definitely, because the next day we kind of had a talk, and it was they didn't ride me too hard, but they just made it clear, that that alcohol and cannabis can get you in a lot of trouble. The main, my dad was really adamant that if you because in Wisconsin, man, it's still, there was people getting, if there's a seed or a small bud, like everyone in the car getting arrested, everyone getting fined, and having to go to court, and it's just not, it wasn't accepted the way that it is accepted now. And so that the main focus of me getting in trouble was that, you can mess up the rest of your life by just hanging out with friends and doing this. And but I mean, I remember just, I'd laying in my room and just closing my eyes and just listening. I would just listen to music, and I have a love for music. I'm also a musician. I play music every day, multiple instruments, and I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah,
for sure.
So that's a wow, what a blast from the past.
That's awesome, man. It's so funny because I've spent like a couple of times during like the summers of my youth in Wisconsin, because my dad, his whole side of the family is from Illinois and Wisconsin. And the one thing that I remember the most is bottle rocket fights in cornfields. And just like corn stalks exploding around you. We were like, I look back on it now and I'm like, God, we were so fucking stupid.
Yeah,
but
that could have been bad.
Damn, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of space. There's a lot of space to kind of stretch out. there. And and there's a lot of there's a lot of people that are closet smokers there. That because a lot of there was swag, or I don't know, Bam, or I don't know what they call it on the West Coast, but just Mexican seeded out weed.
Sure.
And there was also Beasters from Canada up north,
Right.
which was like, it looked really good, bright green, but it looked good, smelled good. People would call it Pretend-a-Kind because it just wouldn't get you that ripped.
Sure.
Thinking back, I believe it would probably just like a 45-day hydro or something. Like if I had to, I can't
Premature
really,
and
yeah, I can't remember, but it was just, I remember it's so bright green, so frosty, and I think it was just like probably a little bit over nutriented hydro fast harvest. And then there was homegrown, which you don't hear about this very often because especially in the medical market here and in Cali, like the medical people who would do what would be called homegrown there was really good, but there was this in between of swag and really good, which was coming from, and then there was the nugs or kind or whatever, which was coming from the West Coast, obviously. And that was the top of the line. Then below, so top shelf. Then below that would be Beasters, and then below that was homegrown between swag and Beasters. And and it was just somebody growing it in their backyard or in their basement with a, usually it would be a metal halide light that somebody got from a stadium when they were changing it. Like that was what I saw typically, or
Nice.
And it would always be, just not trimmed well, and it would be, probably it was harvested too early and it just wasn't cured and dried correctly, But
Hey, but still, people were putting in the effort to try and get that home grow. I mean, I would always hear of people throwing a few plants out in their cornfields, because it would
totally.
It wouldn't grow as tall as the corn, but you could still like stay under the radar, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when did you first then encounter like a growing plant?
So there's, in another funny thing about the Midwest, there's like what we call ditchweed, and it's there's just and it could have been, we also when we're driving around with the homies, and you had a frisbee and you're rolling up joints or whatever, you just throw all the seeds out. So it could have been something like that, and it could have just been through the years just breeding wildly, but we would pick that sometimes, probably when we were like really young, and I mean, gosh, that or swag was probably my first encounter, just really seeded out stuff, or you're saying a growing plant?
Yeah.
A growing plant would be, that would be just a wild ditchweed plant.
Okay.
And then, and then sometimes just the older skaters in town or someone's mom or dad who we'd find a plant, hidden, like it would be, out in the field behind some trees or something like that. And then, of course we would always take when I was a little bit old, and after that first encounter, I would like to say that I don't think that kids should smoke weed at necessarily the age that I started at. I don't think that, I think
we don't
that,
condone that. No.
Yeah, I think that there is an age where, you should let your brain develop fully. And I think that there's some scientific studies that are backing that you should, allow your brain to develop before you're hindering it with any kind of substance, whether it's cannabis or alcohol or anything, maybe even too much caffeine. So, just take that for what it is, but I didn't become a user normally, and then I was in high school and people were, I was more introduced to it more often, and I was a casual user. I enjoyed it as a break to thinking normal. And,
Sure.
And at that point is when, you'd get some seeds and there would be like a spot by a river or something, and we'd try to grow them there. And, funny story that I just remembered is, at one point, my dad was like, "Hey, come out here." He's like, "What is this?" And there was a plant, clearly a plant growing. It was about this big, and I really did not plant those seeds there. I don't know. I don't know how that got there or who put it there. And man, I should talk to him about that, because he did not believe me. He did, and I was like, "I really didn't plant that. I promise you, I didn't plant that."
Did you guys have bird feeders or anything?
Bird feeders? Yeah, there's. I mean, there's bird feed. There was bird feeders. And
Because there'll be
feeders.
hemp seeds in those.
Oh, maybe that was it. Yeah.
I've seen people get busted because they had hemp seeds in their bird seed feeders.
Oh.
There's this story of like this grandma, right? She was older, and there was like these giant hemp plants growing over her fence, and she just thought that they were cool looking weeds. But they were actually hemp seeds out of her bird feeder.
Oh my God.
And yeah, she almost got like charged with like a felony. It was in some, very draconic era state.
Yeah.
And I think it was like 10 years ago or something, but still totally could have happened.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, it definitely wasn't me, But he was like, But so I should revisit that. I should go and clear my name. Be like, that really wasn't me.
It was the squirrels.
It was the squirrels. Yeah, now I have an alibi. That is too funny. Oh man, that's great.
Well, so yeah, then tell me, so it's like your first encounters with these plants, right? Were in the ditchweed, you were just seeing it growing wildly, whether it be from someone chucking seeds out or from it actually being some sort of feral hemp.
Yeah.
When did you start to see it being grown with intention, where like you saw it grown and you were like, holy shit, this is what it can look like?
So yeah, it was. So when just like those, like I told you, those river spots trying to grow them. That was in the late '90s, trying, and it was never good. It just never turned out well, and it seemed impossible to grow like it seemed impossible from the best that you would see to what could be produced from a seed, and then when I turned 18, I was really interested in. I loved the plant, and I was like, I wasn't a daily user even then, but I just loved it, and I would always ask, where did this come from? Like, where did you get this? I mean, there was a music venue, Alpine Valley, which is a famous, it's a famous outdoor amphitheater, similar to the Gorge. Maybe not quite as beautiful view, but it has a really steep hill, and and bands like the current model of the Grateful Dead would go through there, or bands like Fish or Dave Matthews would go there, and we could go down there, and that's really where you would really see. That's the first time I smoked anything that was like Chem Dog,
Okay.
and or OG, but it didn't really. There was no names back then. People weren't really naming it. It was just called Nugs or Kind, and so I would always ask, and I'd say, which people, it would always, I remember it weirding people out. I'm like, where did this come from? And they're just like, hey, like, what are you talking about, dude? And I'm just, and they can see that I'm just a young kid, but I'm just like, where does this come from? Like, how do people get this? And they're just, and then they're like, this would kept, a name that kept happening was Humboldt. They said Humboldt. This came from Humboldt, And so I kept being like, and this is before the internet,
Sure.
and so it's kind of, it was a different time. You couldn't just type in on your phone and be like, what is Humboldt? And so you start asking, oh, what is Humboldt? And they're like, oh man, that's where all the hippies are in Northern California, or people don't even know. And so I was like, they're like, it's in California. That's where all the good weed is. And so when I turned 18, I was like, I'm going to go to college, and I want to be on the West Coast, and I want to kind of see where all this good weed is coming from. I moved to Santa Barbara, which is basically outside of LA, and it was not what I was looking for.
No.
And I was heavily into skateboarding there, and was trying to get like onto some teams or whatever there. And I didn't like it, and came back to Wisconsin, and then I ended up moving out to Humboldt to go to what is called the College of the Redwoods there. That's in your weekend. HSU is in, the Humboldt State University is in Arcata. And I had multiple friends going to HSU, and so I just went to affordability wise, I went to College of the Redwoods, and I needed the problem was I needed a job to start help pay for the school, because I didn't even have enough money after I enrolled and signed up for a payment plan, but I didn't have any way to make money. I'm looking for a job in town, and there just wasn't a lot. There was, I think, Arcata Pizza Deli was and there's a couple breweries. Sure. And so I'm hitchhiking into town one day, and this guy picks me up, and he was like, I started complaining, like, I'm trying to get a job, I don't know what I'm going to do or whatever. And he was like, do you do farm work? And I was just like, I will, and
right?
And I was thinking, like, when I needed extra money in Wisconsin too, I would go wake up early and go pick strawberries on some of the farms.
Sure.
And so he's like, okay. And so
farm work in Humboldt.
Yeah, and so and me being just such a young kid, I didn't even put two and two together that what I was looking for
so
just
funny.
picked me up, and so he takes me out to this place, like, which is like probably a horror story for my parents. Like, I'm hitchhiking.
It's like a story from Murder Mountain or something.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you want a job? We'll pay you cash. Just come out and I'll drive you out to this place that. It was way out of town, and so I ended up just shoveling just dirt and doing just like barn, like breaking down stalks and putting them in burn piles and filling water tanks and stuff. But the plants were there, and they had their overwinter veg area, and they just seeing an outdoor plant, like I had never seen an outdoor plant, and they were huge. I mean, they had to have been. I mean, they seemed like 1,000 feet tall to me, but they were probably in 500-gallon pots, and they were probably 10 feet tall. Probably 5 to 10 pound plants, and I mean, I'm just like.
What year was this?
2000, 2002. 2001.
Wow. Yeah.
And I mean, my mind is just, I'm like, and it's like, at first it's scary. It's like everything that I've been told up to this point is this plant is very dangerous. And I know it's not, but the mind is crazy. When they say, this plant is dangerous, like and I'm just like, just a hint of being startled, and then I was like, wow, this is great. And so he helped me, let me work for him, and just really lucked out, and ended up paying for my entire time there, just working like that. And my college friends that I met in that era, I mean, one of them, lifelong friends, one of them is my friend Brandon from Shepherd's Meadow Farms in Northern California. It's like still in it, like growing some of the best Cali herb there is, all organic, in beds, indoor, outdoor, and light dep. It just like we kind of all just, and I met other people from there, from Humboldt. I kind of met some people in Mendocino. And then I ended up in Trinity County, just off of the experience, and what I noticed is the willingness to just shovel dirt, like just shovel dirt and mix beds and smart pots, and just from there, just doing the jobs that nobody else would want to do, and there's just, on a farm work, there's unlimited work. So if you go out there and you can wake up early. If you can wake up early and get the job done, and you're not afraid to work through the dry heat during the summer, you can pretty much get hired anywhere. And so I just kept doing that, working for whoever, and you know how it's word of mouth and friends like that, and then you got a farm, and then there's the neighbors have a farm, and the neighbors have a farm, and so I just kind of kept leapfrogging to where I ended up in Trinity with a good friend, and he was growing just monsters. I mean, 10-pound plants, and
nice.
you could. So back then, I'm sure it's the same now, but in NorCal, you can have, in Humboldt and Trinity and Mendo, you can have 99 plants for your medical card. And so these farms are, or were, completely legit. I mean, there was helicopters, there was camp helicopters always flying over, and sometimes they'd be so low that you could actually see a guy there just like looking, counting, you know. It's like, I don't know if you mentioned earlier that you see my Instagram page. I'll put posts up of the helicopters because there's still like lingering PTSD from just hearing a helicopter fly over. And
Sure.
you know, maybe we're the last generation to experience that or to feel that, but that's a little funny side note. But so back to the question. Just moving out to Northern California in the Emerald Triangle was absolutely the defining moment of me entering the cannabis industry and being trusted to be out on these people's farms and being trusted to set up the soil, mix the soil, mix the beds. I mean, you don't get with here in Oregon, we're a little bit more north, and with indoor farming, you could chop and reset fairly quickly. But your outdoor runs, you know, there was a light depth run, and then there was an outdoor run, maybe 2 light depths if you were really, really on it. But that's a lot of work and a lot of capital you need to do a run like that. So I feel very lucky to be trusted to work under people that were my mentors, you know, that showed me what they were doing, because there was, I mean, I guess there was the forums, but back then I was too afraid to go onto the forums because the internet was new, and everybody said if you went on the internet that they would find a way to track you down and through your email or something, you know, like that, and they were going to find you. And so we just I didn't even go on the forums. I was just too scared, and it was a lot of word of mouth and working with somebody and being like, oh, this is what we do. Why do you do this? And trial and taking the things that I respect and see success with of people and holding that and letting go of the other stuff and working with someone else. And it was, you know, it wasn't as easy as it is today to go on YouTube and ask a certain question and see what their experience was, where you can actually see the beginning, the middle, and the end of what they're claiming is to be the right thing. So,
Sure.
so it was a real, I feel really lucky to have had great mentors, and to have been just entrusted to as a pretty young adult to be out in the place that I was, you know. And but I was, you know, I wanted to be into it, you know. I always kind of worked jobs, and I always had you know, or was like in school or something, and kind of always had like a backup plan. But there was always the dream of being a grower. Truthfully, I never would have thought that this would be my life right now, though. I remember there's a place called Redwood Park up outside of Humboldt State University, where every 420 there's a big, you know, smoke out, and you go up there and you smoke some weed, and it's you know, it's a good place to meet up and just chill in the grass. And I remember just being up there for an event and multiple times at HSU campus, and just being like, the sentiment within the community was that this is never going to go legal, and you know, and so I really never thought that my future would be a legal cannabis grow and have it be where I'm honestly not afraid. I work with legislators. I speak with our local sheriff. You know, I've shown them the plants. Like I said, like we spoke a while back. I speak to the Senate and the House. You know, and I would have never done that back in the day, you know, with just a medical card. But the times are changing, so never say never, you know.
For sure.
Because I mean, the times are changing, and they change faster, exponentially faster, as we move into the future.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And your story is so interesting because you, I mean, it's interesting because of like your background in the Midwest and coming out here. It's not like the most unique because I've heard of other people that come out from the Midwest to Humboldt specifically for that. Like, hey, I like cannabis, and all I'm hearing about is Northern California. So that's where I got to be. I want to learn about this. And it sounds like a lot of other stories that I've heard, bouncing around from different farms, helping people out, and, kind of being part of that circle of trust that's within the Humboldt community and the Emerald Triangle community. And so I think that that's really great. And, if you were working up there all the way up through like the early 2000s, I'm sure that I was smoking some of that weed because I was down in the Bay Area. So,
oh yeah.
So, it's really interesting to hear like how the worlds collide sort of, and how Humboldt was a hub for a lot of that in the early cultivation days. So what were some of those experiences that you had when it came to cultivation techniques that someone taught you something that you're either still using today or that was just mind-blowing, groundbreaking for you at the time?
Something that was well, I would say we'll just call probably my biggest mentor. We'll call him Wild. So these guys are old school and they don't
Sure.
have Instagram pages, and they don't, I'll call them up every once in a while and chat with them, and they're still, they're still doing their thing with the old school strains and everything. But anyway, yeah. So this guy, one time everybody was dumping their soil, right? Getting rid of their soil after every run. And I remember one year he just said, I think it came up because he said, these guys are buying everybody's used soil. They're trucking it off, and they're also selling soil in the spring. He's like, I think they're just reusing the soil. And he's like, I think that I'm going to just not buy new soil this year. And everybody was like, you can't do that. It was like if you do that, it is the end of the world. And so, and he was no, he was just dead set on it. And he was like, nope. And he went down to it was a feed store, and in the back they had all the nutrients. So it was
Sure.
like an animal feed store, but they had the weed guys could go in the back and get like the nutrients. This is Trinity County,
Sure.
And so he went and got a bunch of worm castings, got a bunch of chicken manure, and then even then there still was not the amendments. Like kelp meal was available. It's nothing like when I go into concentrates in Portland where they have every
Sure.
specific thing. But it was worm castings, it was chicken manure, which I believe to be, thinking back, I think it was Super Green, which is a local Oregon thing here. So worm castings, chicken manure, kelp, bat guano. There was two different kinds of guano for the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And so anyway, and we amended them, and it was, at that point, it was the best that I had ever smoked. That run was the best. I was like,
Nice.
Holy shit. And everybody came over, and it was a big deal, and that was, that early 2000s. It was a big deal that he just didn't spend $20,000 on soil,
He spent like 5,000 on amendments and pocketed 15.
Yeah. So it's
Hell yeah.
I mean, and it was, it was like, it was huge, and I had never seen anybody. People were still, if they grew indoor, they're just trucking it out, like trying to find a spot to dump it or whatever. And in the word back then was that if you reuse your soil, that it would kill everything, and it just wouldn't work. And that is
Sure.
not true. And so I would say that mentality. He was such a good mentor because he would do that, and he came up with this little thing. He said, he was like, I don't recommend this until you're an expert, but he's like, you got to sometimes just garden with feeling. He's like, if you get a feeling to try something, you got to do it and see it out to the end. Because that's a big risk. Like I said before, you get
Sure.
one shot at your outdoors, and he really went for it. He swung for the fences, and man, did he hit a home run. So that mentality, and this is the guy who, some of the best advice I've ever had. He was the one who really made me grow indoor. I was like, I don't need to grow if I can work here and have access to all of this, but he really pushed me to like, and I did do indoors or whatever, but he pushed me to be like, you should focus in on some strains and do your own thing so that you can run experiments instead of just grabbing clones from someone growing them out and then like doing whatever. But and the single best piece of advice that he gave me, other than watching it, being there for watching that soil reusing, was that he said, keep one plant out of your whole thing. Because I was like, I don't feel comfortable growing just indoor by myself. It never turned out, it was never home run. It was good, but back then, it didn't matter how good it was. You could always sell it, even if it was the worst crop you've ever seen. Everything's still, it was all medical back then. So it could be used for something, even if it was just edibles. There was
sure.
Zero waste. But he said, keep one plant in the corner, and he's like, if you do that, he's like, just grow it and then call me if something happens and you don't know what to do. And so I did that, and I grew it, and I was using GH 3-part. I don't know if you're general
sure.
hydroponics 3-part.
Yeah.
And man, that simple nutrient regimen was, I have put out some of the best product with that just simple 3-part thing. I tried adding them all, took them all out again, except for maybe silica and something. But that simple 3-part put out some of the best product ever with just a simple thing. But I left my one in the corner, and I was in what it did is it taught me. I said, hey, it taught me, one, that I was using too much nutrients. 2, that a plant will grow really, really well with just water in soil for a long time before you actually need to add anything. And that mentality of just seeing what a plant does has carried through until today for me. Even now, I will run a plant 3 times before I know that it is a keeper.
For sure.
I will run it just in a bag of soil, and this is 100% carried over from his advice like that. So I will run. If I make, I do a lot of breeding as well too. So if it's something I made and I grow it, or I get a clone from somebody, it doesn't matter. I'll just grow it in soil. And some people view that as a waste of space or whatever. But I like to see what a plant does, see when it's going to hit these deficiencies, and what you notice is that some plants they don't need extra nitrogen, or some plants they will. At week 6, they will completely yellow out like a light switch, and you're like, holy cow, like that's amazing. But you never know that if you're constantly dumping a lot of nutrients in, which is a lot of people's entry into this, which is, it's not good or bad. It's neither here nor there, but they're like, they're using somebody's set regimen, and they're not adjusting it for the specific strain, and they don't know because they've never grown the plant to see what it expresses without it, and having an A and B. And so that
I just want to pause you really quick, because I just want to, reiterate for the listeners that this is one of the best ways to make sure that the plant that you're growing is something you want to grow. You start at a baseline. Right? Your baseline is ripping open a bag of soil, popping a plant in it, and letting it rip, seeing what happens. For a lot of people, like for myself, that grow hydroponically, that means doing what you do for every other plant, the same for this new plant, and not changing it because it needs something different, but seeing where those differences pop up, where those needs pop up, so that you can then, if you need to adjust for it because you really want to produce it at its like peak morphology, at its peak terpene and cannabinoid expression, then you can tweak it from there. But if you don't know where that it falls on your baseline already, then you don't know where you need to go. Sometimes you're doing too much, sometimes you're doing too little, and you need to adjust from there. But I love that that's kind of your mentality, is that you just have a bag of soil, you pop it in there and see what happens, especially because, and we'll get into this, but you grow with all organic amendments. So, there's a lot of, you have a lot of things available, like a lot of levers to pull there, but also they have limited limited applications based on times of release and the stage of the plant's life cycle. You don't really want to flush organics, and all these different things that kind of hinder but help depending on how you're looking at it and approaching it. But sorry, I had to jump in there and be like, oh man, this is such a good point for people that are trying to figure out if something works for them. So what else? So you got this one plant, you're growing it the first time, you do it in this bag of soil, but you said you do 3 rounds to make sure that it's a keeper. What are you doing round 2?
3 rounds from seed. If I do from seed, because it just seems like the third clone of something will normally be the way that it's going to express in commercial cultivation. Commercial, even
right.
though I'm small, but it is for profits now, and I do have a business that supports my family.
But even for home growers, that's super important, is knowing that there's a difference from your seed plant flower run to your clone plant flower run, and even from there, some plants, they don't reach like peak maturity for like 100 days after the seeds popped. So if you're cutting clones on day 50 or 60 and then you're vegging it only for 2 weeks, then you still might not be at like the most sexually mature that plant is going to reach. So you're going to have a different flower morphology as well as growth pattern in the plant. And so like for myself, whenever I'm pheno hunting, I don't even bother flowering out seeds anymore, because it just doesn't make sense. And
it's not what you're going to get.
And you've seen it. And this is vindication for me, because some people are like, no, just flower out the seed. I'm like, don't do it. You're going to hit it on that second or third round and realize that it's shit compared to that seed run. And then you're going to be all upset at all that time that you've wasted. But yeah, great point, man. Great point. But continue, please.
Well, so and I just, just being able, and, to expand on that, in my grow here, it is very slow. Change is very slow, because because this is the way we grow podcast. I would like to just expand and help give some people some pointers of, if you, first of all, I highly suggest that you put a plant in the corner of your grow room and just let it express itself, and it'll teach you, it'll show you the plant's expression. 2, you can learn how to deal with deficiencies or excess, and so you adjust and you learn how to do micro changes. But if I see something wrong, I don't really chase stuff very hard, and so what I'll do is get I wish I had one in here. I don't have it in here. It's out in the grow, but get a notebook. If you are a grower, get a notebook. It can be in I'm old school, so I like to write it down, because I write I wish I could show you how crazy it looks like. No one could ever decipher what it is, but you write it down, because if you say I'll remember, you're not going to remember. Write it down. Write your harvest dates. Write you got to write it down, and that would be a huge one for any grower of any level. Write it down and keep a good journal, so when things go wrong or they go right, that you can repeat it. So often people are like, oh my gosh, like, look at this. I'm like, holy crap. They're like, this is the best run I've ever done. Like, what do you think you did differently?
Right.
And if you don't know, then how are you ever going to repeat that?
You say change is slow, and it's so important, because sort of along the same lines of the scientific method, if you're, not quantifying or qualifying those changes that you're making, then you can't go back and adjust for the successes or failures that you face from those changes.
Yeah.
That's also why, like, you don't don't go adding like a bunch of new things at once. Maybe one, maybe two, and then go from there. But yeah, that very, very good points. I feel like you're speaking the language of an educated grower, where you've learned from all of your mistakes and successes.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, and I don't ever change maybe two, but always one thing, and that's why change is so slow. So I'm just trying to think of I mean, for example, this new micro tier that I just started called Prism Farms. It took me a year to get 1 to 1.5 pounds of light consistently. Like that's a long time, and I could have pushed it through, but I needed to learn the environment and see just what the watering is different. The cycling of water in that room is just different than what I'm used to. And so, I try, if I'm gonna change the percent, the relative humidity percent, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to let that run finish. If next time I'm like, oh, well, I think that it's because I'm not using enough, I need to add some blood meal or some bat guano to the soil, I'm going to do that in that run, and I'm going to mark that run so I know that that's the soil that it was in, and I'm going to see that run through. I'm not going to be like, oh, and it looks like it needs some K at the end as well, because I need to know what happened when I did one thing. And I see so many people, they're like, oh my gosh, that run was terrible. They switch from HPS to LEDs, and then they switch from cocoa with perlite to just straight cocoa, and then they're like, oh, we got this nutrient company is going to sponsor us for 2 runs, and we're going to switch up our nutrients. And then, oh, my friend he's got 50 free clones of this one, and so you got 4 things right there. You don't know what's going to happen at all. Like that,
Yeah.
And then you go and I've seen this happen. You get a terrible run, and you're like, what is going on here? What happened? And the thing is that it's not. And in this industry, like a lot of times it's happened to me too. You feel like a terrible grower. Like, what? How did I ever do this or whatever? But it's like, it's really just, you got to be consistent. You got to change slowly, and you have to adjust slowly, and just make sure that the end product is what the goal is, So
Absolutely. Yeah, and slow change, especially when you're in an organic system, where like the nutrient cycling is so much slower.
yeah,
You do really have to be intentional and very slow with the changes, because you can flush a hydroponic system and
yeah,
change everything on a dime, one day to the next, and potentially, avoid catastrophe or steer into catastrophe even further in some instances.
right,
But with an organic system, it is a boat rather than like a fast little
dingy.
dinghy or something like that. What so yeah, tell us more then about sort of your style of growing now. You've accumulated all this knowledge bouncing around from different farms.
Yeah.
You were in Humboldt. We kind of stopped the story there. When did you transition to Oregon? And then, yeah, tell us more about sort of your
Well,
current style of growing.
so I went from the Emerald Triangle. I moved down to uh, I mean, there's a lot of stops in between, but I landed in Lake Tahoe, and was
Okay.
snowboarding, and there was a huge cannabis community in the Tahoe Basin as well too. And so I lived there for 10 years. I met my wife there, and met another whole group of just lifelong friends that and more, it was, and we got, medical cards there too. But it was crazy then. I mean, that place. So now we're out of Humboldt, and
Right.
medical cards are still valid, but you don't have 99, and the police will still kick your door in, and if they notice an electric bill or something like that, and just take everything, and you can't have it back, like including grow equipment. Take all of your plants and all your grow equipment.
Even
You
if
can
it's
go
all
to,
within your limit and stuff.
yeah. I mean, just like, I mean, it just happened all the time, and
Damn.
so it was back to being like scared and underground, and we would do just small rooms, and in houses, no warehouses or anything like that, or no big outdoors at all, and and then I kind of, I hit every mountain and snowboarded every day and everything. And I just, I was planning on moving to San Francisco, and I went over there and looked at a couple warehouses because I was going to like live in it and, and do music and grow my plants or whatever. And
Sure.
It was just, I had an epiphany when I was looking at this one warehouse spot. I was standing there with my, with my wife, and there was like we just heard a drive-by, and then later on that day we heard it was like some rap video. They're shooting a rap video, and there was just a drive-by, and I was like how badly do I want this? Like is this worth it's just, and it wasn't, the answer was no, it's not worth it. I called up some friends, and I was like, hey, some really close friends, and I was like, I don't know what to do in my life right now. Do you have any advice for me? And one of the friends that was a really longtime friend said, hey, I'm living in Portland. You should come up here because the scene is really, it's cheap rent. There is a huge, music scene. There's a huge medical thing. So I look up medical stuff. I've got all my stuff in a U-Haul, and I'm sleeping in a van looking for warehouses with my wife. And so I just kind of, we go and look up like Oregon medical or whatever. And we're like, I was like, this is going to go legal. My big bet was this is going to go legal before it does in Cali, but I don't think it did. But I went up. Oh, it did?
Yeah, Oregon went legal for recreational
Colorado,
in 2016,
Oregon.
And then California was like 2018.
That's right.
Yeah. I was super surprised as well. I always thought California was going to go legal first, but Colorado beat everyone to the punch.
They did. I didn't see that coming. So I move up to Portland and just get immersed in the medical scene, get my medical card. I'm still going down to the Emerald Triangle area and working farms and stuff during the seasons. And then I would take off and I would work. And I was working, I had a bunch of jobs in the Portland area as well. And then, I had an experience where, similar to the San Francisco experience, where I just it was where I was, it made it clear that this plant is not worth things just get in things just there's I don't really want to go into it. It was just a bad
totally
experience. It was a bad experience that it was a different time, and it's just it really wasn't safe in every situation, and I think that a lot of growers that I've talked to off the record have said that they've shared in an experience that is just it's we put ourselves in a lot of unsafe situations, and once you kind of see that dark side, you are very careful not to allow anyone close or get in a situation like that again. And it thankfully was the catalyst to me. I that situation happened. I had driven all night to be there, and I instantly just got in my car and was like, you know what, I'm going to go back up to and this was 2015, right? 2014, 2015 or something. Like it had been voted on that it was going to go legal. Drove my car right back up to Portland and was like, I'm going to get a legal grow by myself. Like it's never going to be like this again. It's not worth a plant, man. It's not worth it, So that, so I'm in Oregon, and then I put in I think a 60 or 90 day notice in my house, and I'm like, I'm going to get a farm, and I try to look around Portland. It's $1 million. And I'm like, shit. I was like, I can't afford this. So I go a little bit larger. And we're getting down to the last days that I have to be out of my house. And finally, I find a place in McMinnville here that is a small farm. It's a 1 acre farm. And it's actually from the old schoolhouse from the 1800s. Back then, for every 100 acres or whatever, there has to be one schoolhouse, and this was the old schoolhouse for our neighborhood here. And so we bought it, and it's an old for the land and for the ability because because when I got all motivated, I was really reading the laws over and over and over. I read, and these are, just hundreds of pages, and you have statutes, and then you have the rules, and then you have statutes, which is just, you can get into it. But if which is another piece of advice for someone, if you want to get into the legal industry, go and print up your state rules for the legal industry in your state, and read those, and read them, and read them, and read them again, and learn those rules inside out. I mean, there has been so many times when, I was going to seminars, right? And when it was going legal, that these lawyers were putting on, and I actually there was one cannabis lawyer who's doing these and charging $100 to $200 a head in these full rooms, and multiple times I was, hey, that's not actually right. Hey, that's not actually right. This is the thing, because I had read these rules multiple times, and so finally he was getting frustrated at first, and then he was like, well, why don't you come up here? Like, why don't you come up here? And he was like, what do you have to say about this? And because it's mostly just the rules of what is allowed and what is not, and it's a heavy read, but get a highlighter and go through it, and because a lot of my success is one, being at the right place at the right time, betting on Oregon, but a lot of it is that I know the rules. I had a run-in on Instagram the other day. Some lady was like, those plants aren't legal. I posted a thing about me moving with them plants with a truck. It's like, those aren't legal. And I was like, they don't have tags on them. And I pointed out the specific OLCC date and memo that they put out, and cited the exact Oregon revised statutes of the rule change that we could do batch tagging and group stuff. And so, yeah. and it got some pretty funny reactions, because they were like, whoa. But it's just like having that knowledge, and it's I'm not a strong reader, and I'm not with legislation, but once you just read it over and over with a highlighter, and if you know those rules, because a lot of people are, you either have to pay a lawyer to do it for you, or a lot of people are intimidated by the rules. Like, I built a greenhouse here, and they said I had to put a steel door on the greenhouse because there was light assisted, because there's lights in the greenhouse, and that makes it indoor, and that the rule is if it has lights, it's indoor. And I said, well, no, the only place that has to have a steel door is a place where usable marijuana is stored. And I had a back and forth, and I'm trying to be respectful, but I know that I'm right and I'm following the rules. And so it took, a month or two of me going higher and higher up and being like, I'm telling you that this is the rules that I'm following are right here. And in dealing with legislators and rules commissions, they don't like to be told that they're wrong. And
no,
luckily, I have gone to enough meetings now where I've established a good relationship with them. Although it's frustrating and annoying for me to be there, they'll laugh about it now, But I need the support of the legislature and the governing bodies to be a small farm, because it's really hard to be a super small farm in this industry. It's hard to be anybody in this industry. But
for sure.
Sorry, I kind of veered off, but that was
no, that was such a great tangent that you went on, because I feel like for anybody that wants to get into this industry, like, look, even for myself, right? I'm not an owner. I'm just an operator, right? I just put in the work while I'm paid to be there, and then I can kind of step away and not have to think about it as much. I still do stress about it. I'm checking my phone at 5:30 this morning to make sure that certain things are happening, because I know that there's a little bit of a problem we've been dealing with. But that's just more like for my own peace of mind rather than, you know, the peace of mind required through reading legislature and remembering all of these different laws and statutes and rules and regulations pertain to the business that you're operating, like you're going through. And, you know, I was going to get into it at the end, but I think this is a great segue to just start talking a little bit about some of those experiences that you've had speaking in front of the Senate to try and get different bills and laws passed. What are some of those efforts geared towards that you're going into the Senate to talk to them about, and where have you succeeded there? Because I know that we were going to record yesterday, but you were in front of the Senate speaking. So tell me a little bit about some of these recent experiences and where you found success based on your tenacity and understanding of the law.
Well, okay, I'd like to start in the beginning. Really, it became legal, and they put a bunch of rules in that were kind of overbearing, and we kind of also, as an industry, let them do it because we were like, let's just get it, you know?
Yeah.
So, first of all, if anybody's listening to this in a legal state or about to be legal state, go in there and be a part of the rule making and make sure that if there is a rule that does not make sense, and it is just like, for example, weighing the fan leaves of your plants when you cut them off for deleafing absolutely serves no purpose. That's just one example out of hundreds. But be there to say, hey, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't keep people safe. If anything, it hurts the businesses. So, but that being said, I try to be active as much as an owner operator can be in these events and in the industry and community. But there's a lot of complaining, a lot of blaming, and I kind of fell into that loop, and then you know, I'm just sitting there and I had the epiphany. You know, I don't. Complaining doesn't do anything. Making social media posts, maybe that does help. Actually, social media posts can get people riled, but complaining and sitting around and just blaming and complaining, it doesn't go anywhere. And so I made a conscious decision that I know these rules. I want to make change. And so I started speaking, and I researched, how do you make laws and change laws? And they said the easiest way is to use the Administrative Procedures Act, which allows the public to speak to the House and the Senate when laws are going through. So I did that, got zero traction. You know, it's you can speak, and they're so busy, and they don't care about cannabis. They don't care about a guy. One guy has a small farm. So then there was the CIAO, which is the cannabis lobbying group in Oregon, and I had always kind of had there was like 4 or 5 of them. The OCA, Oregon Cannabis Association, the CIA, there was the Farms Inc., and they've all kind of linked together now, which is, I think, more powerful. But I always kind of had I don't know, like nothing personal. I just was like, I don't want to be a part of this group. It seems like everybody wants to be the only tier 2 in the game, and they're trying to make laws that are just for themselves. But then I kind of had a flip in my head of, you know, these conversations are gonna go down. These rules are gonna be changed, and I'm gonna be at the table. And when I did that, I joined the OLCC Rules Advisory Committee, where they put out the rules, and then the public has the opportunity to speak on behalf of these. And what I spoke about before, the Administrative Procedures Act says that if they make a rule and it affects, and there's all kinds of different things, like if it affects small businesses negatively, they have to change it. And basically just me being there and bringing it up makes it so they can still just deny what I say, but it leaves a legal framework for someone to be like, hey, this isn't working. And we're looking back, and that guy, Jason, said that this isn't going to work and it's not working. And then at that point, someone can, put a lawsuit in or
it provides precedence. Yeah.
That's what it is. And so I joined the CIAO, and I kind of just listened for a year. And then I joined their policy committee, and where it's, a lot of people voting on what they think the industry needs next, and it's all the representatives. And so this is kind of the table. What I'm talking about is the table. Like, I don't necessarily agree with everything that everybody wants, but I can sit at the table and say, that doesn't necessarily help me, but as an industry, to move the industry forward and to support another small business that I want to survive, I can actually put my name behind that, and I can put public comment in for that. And so I joined that, and we came up with there. I think it came out with 3 different bills this year, and multiple things, just things like trade samples, being able to do samples at B2B events that we're allowed to have. Giving employees clones and seeds. We cannot give them, like, I'm making seeds like crazy, but I can't even give someone a seed as a QC sample. That's insane. It's not intoxicating. Why? What purpose does it serve to not allow that?
Or to limit the bringing in new genetics, like putting a limit on it.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right. It's like when bureaucracies get involved in something that requires some sort of, I'm like, containment, like some sort of oversight.
Yeah.
Without the input of those who are having that oversight imposed upon them, you're going to have a lot of these gaps in communication and application, and things like, you can't send employees home with clones or seeds. It doesn't make sense. You're producing these extra clones and all these extra seeds, and it's like, if you understand even one iota of how seed production goes down, then that one plant will produce more seeds for like one individual than they'll ever need in their entire life, and that's just one plant. And so what are you saying, that I can't share those extra seeds, and this is the only genetic that I get to grow for the rest of my life? Because, why do you need to make more seeds? It's like you don't even understand the community and how it operates. And it's really interesting because there's so much history that they can look at to give some level of informing on how it operates, that it seems just almost far-fetched that it's so far skewed from what, like, an operator like yourself or myself or anyone else in the industry, especially, like, mostly just speaking to how it is in Oregon, because I know some other states are a little bit different, but it's weird. And it's really great to see that people like you are stepping up and sort of putting some of that weight on their shoulders to speak out against those sort of miscarriages in application for the laws. So that's awesome. So where are some of the what are some of those things that you've succeeded in seeing passing that you were kind of backing or speaking on?
So through the years, there's been a lot. One, which isn't really cannabis, is they were trying to block when psilocybin went legal. I actually blocked them from blocking it and made it so that anybody can grow on a psilocybin farm in our county here. And that was a huge deal. That took 3 years. But more focused on cannabis is some rules like, oh my gosh. That was tying into that is they were trying to say that you can't have a psilocybin farm and a cannabis farm and a hemp farm on the same property. And I hit them with these are all agricultural crops according to the Oregon revised statutes. And you cannot make restrictions like that. You cannot say that I can't grow corn and peas. You can't say that I can't grow tomatoes and cannabis. So you can't mix any of the farming is very protected in Oregon. And so I made sure that happened. What else has gone through? These bills right now have not passed. They passed the Senate. And what I was speaking on yesterday was at the House of Representatives. And so it'll pass this, and then it'll go to the governor's desk, which will be good. The current fight that happened yesterday, which looked like it was going to go through, was having an OLCC the local governing body for cannabis, the Oregon Liquor Cannabis Commission, having a seat on their board or on their commission for a cannabis business owner, just like they have one for alcohol. There's an alcohol representative on there, and they passed the Senate with no rebuttals. And yesterday was the last day for the House of Representatives, and they showed up. The OLCC showed up in strong opposition to the position, it being allowed. And even the House of Representatives guys, there was a guy who was in there and said, I'm not really a cannabis guy. This is more of a economic development issue for me. But I've seen you guys use this as a tactic before you show up at the very last minute and throw a wrench in the whole thing, hoping to stop and destroy this bill. And so it was nice to get to see a government person call out an agency, because normally they will band together, and
Sure.
and we are there, and this is what happens after you show up and say, we are real businesses. We can't bank. We can't get working capital investments, or not investments, loans. We don't get the tax breaks that a normal business gets, and we just sit there and we tell them, over and over, like, look, we need help here, and you're making rules harder. And so it was nice. So we're hoping that we get a cannabis seat there. The other thing was that, in statute, we can have business to business events where people can bring samples to an event, and this is not open to the public. So I can bring some jars, you could bring some jars, and there's some shops could come in and say, oh, I want to buy some of yours and buy some of mine. And but we can't sell it at that place. So it's all metriced to that place. It has to be okayed 30 days before by the commission, but we have to take it back home, and then drive it out to them. So say someone from Eastern Oregon, how far is it a drive to Eastern Oregon?
Oh, from our farm, it's like 4.5 hours.
Yeah. So it's for me, that's an overnight stay. And that means that, and I've got 3 kids, and I have 2 farms that I have to take care of. And I don't leave, I live here. I live and work and breathe on this farm. So what we're saying in this bill is that what we need to be able to do is sell the product to the person that wants to buy it,
Yeah.
so that I can sell my product into Southern Oregon or to Eastern Oregon, and not have to say, oh, they want to buy this. Okay, I'll meet you next week, because it can change by next week.
Sure.
It is a brutal, which I'd like to talk about too. It's a brutal industry out there where, it's not unheard of to show up to a sale, them not give you the price you agreed upon, or even take what you get. So if I drove 4.5 hours and said, oh, here's that stuff that you said you wanted, and they're like, you know what? This isn't what we thought, and we had a rough week since we talked last. We're not, all the time you'll hear, we're not really buying right now. And then, what do you do? Then I drive home. I missed a whole day on my farm. I don't have employees, and it's for what? Because everything is metric. So that's part of that. Samples, something like that directly helps my farm. I need to be able to sell my product to a company where we're at when we have
Right.
it.
Yeah, bringing samples out to places is, it's not very feasible, especially when you can't then just turn around and have, 10 pounds on hand of that same product right there and boom, sell it. Like, you're not having that ability to do that is hindering so many people, and it's why so many farms go with wholesale, because you can pretty much do that, right? Because then you can just metric it right there to this other farm. But it's super, super frustrating. I agree. And especially with a small farm like yours, where you are putting in all of this work on social media to try and gain awareness of the product and where you're selling this product to, so that people know this is where they can go and pick it up. I always think, like, it would be so amazing if we had some sort of like open air farmers market
I'm working on it. I'm
Oh
working
my,
on it.
because
I am, but
also like,
I don't want to get into it. But
no, I know,
I'm
but like,
trying.
even from there, like, because I think about my time spent in Napa Valley and like, what's a good weekend? Going and hitting up a bunch of wineries, going and having some good food, but bringing that wine and food home with you afterwards, where you like,
Yeah.
and like the tasting room idea is so great. And I know that there's like the issues with like intoxication and driving under the influence and the lack of ability to test accurately for inebriation or intoxication. There's just a whole bunch there.
I
It
mean,
needs people like you doing what you're doing. It's
I mean,
awesome that you are.
every time I go in. So that's it's funny you bring that up, and I don't want to like I'm not there yet with the legislation that I'm going to put in for that. But what I need, and I tell them every single time that I get a chance to speak or I show up at a meeting, I say, we need direct sales for micro tier farms, just like small wineries have a tasting room. And I say it over and over and over again. And it's annoying or whatever, but that is the messaging that, like, that is what's going to solve it. And just like they're like, well, dispensaries are going to this and that, but they're not going to get sales. It doesn't take away, because people who buy, that was the same argument you heard at the wineries. It's going to take away sales. And you know what they found out is that people who are going to go spend $60 a bottle of wine at a tasting room in Napa or here in Willamette. I mean, I can see a vineyard right here. I've got 4 vineyards within 4 miles. And the people who go to a tasting room and buy a bottle, we're not going to go to Safeway and buy a bottle there. It's not
The same bottle. Yeah.
It wasn't. They were never going to go and buy a It doesn't take away from your $10 bottle sale
No.
at Safeway. It just doesn't. And so if we could have a direct sale model, and I've brought it up, and there have been numerous attempts at it, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen slowly but surely, and it's just going to take us talking and repetition and showing up. And the cool thing is I see more and more people showing up, and I try to be adamant about posting ways for people to be a part of the government. And like I posted one, this was last year, I forget what the exact thing was, and I went to the meeting and I just it was just a simple post with a link and said, hey, if you're interested in this, please just write a letter from your heart of how you feel about this. And the commissioners, or the people on the board were like, holy shit, we got 100 letters.
Nice.
from people. And when that happens, not only does that change their mind about something, but it's a legal framework. It's a pathway now, and they are representatives. Like, a lot of times people forget they can brick wall us or whatever, but we have legal repercussions then. If you can go to court and say there was not one person against this, everybody was for this, and you still voted it out, and you can do an appeal on that, and you will most likely win.
Yeah. I always like to think of, I don't know if you know of him, but Spartan Grown on Instagram. He's a heavy advocate for legislature for like home grower rights and stuff in Michigan. And one of the techniques he'll do is, if there's like a bill on the floor, he'll go to his local representative's office and demand a meeting, and they have to be pulled from the floor to come into that meeting because they're your representative, and it takes priority. So they'll do that until they like gain enough traction where it's like they're stalling the bill basically until this person listens that there's this many people who want their voice heard towards either like a yes or a no on the bill. Right. And so I'm like, it's powerful when you get people behind it, like a letter campaign or something, especially when it's local. I feel like, especially.
Yes.
And it does affect people. I mean, the fact that you made a post and that residents of Oregon then wrote into their representative to say, listen to this guy, listen to what they're saying. This is important to us. I mean, they're all voted in. right?
They represent us. They
They
work for
represent
us.
us. They work for us, exactly. And it's really great to hear that it does impact them and that they do take the time to either read it or listen even to, the synopsis of what the sentiment of all of the
Yeah.
letters are. Like that's amazing. And the fact that you then hear back about it, that you made that post, that you got that letter campaign started, that they heard about it, and then you're hearing later, hey man, that you made an impact on us and our thinking. That's awesome.
One time, and you said locally, like I started with going to the Senate and didn't get a lot of traction, and then I started focusing on the county commissioners, and then joining with the CIAO and whatever, and kind of got a little more traction. But on the local level, one time I went in to speak on something, and the commissioner had said, her words were, in their opening remarks were, this passed by a narrow sliver in this in this county. So we're not really sold on it. And so I went up there and gave public comment, and I said, hey, I was like, in your comments you said that this was we shouldn't pass this because it's a very narrow victory. I said, how many of you were voted in by a landslide? I was like, because you won with a narrow victory, does that mean we shouldn't have voted you in and taken the opposition? And then I gave another speech or whatever that I had prepared. And so, and this went on for weeks or months or however long it went on. But she actually one time after the meetings came up to me and said, hey, I just want to let you know that the words that you told when you made me eat my words, she was like, that really, she said, we weren't really even this, we were going to just pass this by or whatever, but those words really resonated with me and made me say that I do need to take this seriously, and that every a narrow victory is still a victory, and that means
Absolutely.
that the people voted for it. And she's like, I had to realize that I am a representative, and I had a lot of respect for her, and for saying that, and doing her job the way that she needed, that we voted her in to do.
For sure. Yeah, I
So
mean,
that was cool.
if the majority is their boss, right, then that's who they need to listen to, especially locally. When like the numbers really do matter. Like every single vote matters in that percentage. You don't have some weird electoral thing going on that subverts what the people are actually saying in the majority. So that's awesome too, that they like took that time and recognized maybe their own hubris of being like, I think that maybe I know a little bit better because I'm the one elected in, and even if I won by a margin, my opinion matters more. It's like, no, your opinion only matters because you won, and it was a narrow victory then. So it's good that you brought that up, like kind of a little bit of a clap back. That's awesome. Cool, man.
Works.
Well, yeah, it does. It does, especially like pointing that mirror in people's face. I always hear it's hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle. And so when you're inside a government, right, and you're like just doing government, you don't see necessarily how those actions affect the people who literally put you there. And so to turn that back on them, bravo, that's awesome. It needs to happen more often. And the fact that you got that response from it shows that it works. So yeah, good job. Awesome. We kind of went heavy into like, I guess we call it politics. Like it is political to talk about legislature and stuff. We didn't necessarily take one side or the other. Yeah. So, I wanted to dive into a little bit more of some of the awards that you've won. Having 11 awards under your belt, or maybe even more at this point, is impressive.
Now.
Holy crap. I mean, having that many awards under your belt in any industry, in any category, in anything that you could get an award in is super impressive. Especially being owner operator, small tier. It sounds like you're doing it with limited help, or just the help that you can gather from family or friends. Tell us a little bit about that process of like, how did you go into winning awards? Like, was it something that you did intentionally, or did it just happen?
I kind of always thought that they were fake and pay to play. And, my friend, when I just started an Instagram, sent me this thing that one of it was the Northwest Cannabis Club up on Powell, I believe. It's closed now, but they were saying that they had that they were doing a contest for people. And if this was in, I don't know, probably 2016 or something like that. So it was just an Instagram post. I entered that, and people, it was kind of, and I won, and I was like, holy crap, like this is amazing. There's really no way to judge. It's hard to judge because it's similar to like the music industry. Like I really, I write the songs that I write, not to say that they're better than anybody else's, but because it's how I feel that the music should be expressed or whatever. And so I entered and I won. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like it felt really good. I'm really glad that people are connecting with this organic grow style. And then I was introduced from those people that said, hey, well, there's one in December. It's the Oregon Growers Cup. And then, and I entered that and didn't even like, I was like, hey, can I get the reviews of that? And I did terrible because I was put in some like old school sativa stuff that I really liked. It didn't do well. And then I started being like, okay, well, what is it that people are looking for? Or what? Yes, and I was like, well, or what do I think would win in a contest like this? And so I had held on to this Ghost OG cut from my days in Arcadas when I had gotten it.
Okay.
So, and I still have it. I grow it once a year. And then
Nice.
I entered that, and in the first year that they did the Grow Master for the Oregon Growers Cup, which was 2018 or 2019, 2017, I don't know. But and I won the first ever Grow Master, which is where everybody gets the same clone and they have to grow it the best. It's like, to me, that is the best contest there is because
I like that.
it's hard. You get a clone on June 1st and you have to grow it. And
Do you remember what genetic that was?
Oh man, it was forbidden fruit maybe.
Okay.
When it was like just getting hot, like they always have a hot new strain.
Right.
But and that one, I love that one because it's hard, but they're all hard in their own way. One of the things too that's really hard as well, being like you said, just being a small owner operator, is that I only grow 1 pound of each plant. So I'm choosing from 16 ounces, and those aren't all tops. A lot of my friends' farms that I go to, they are choosing from 50-pound batches, and they grow 1 gallon pots, flood to drain or whatever, or drain to waste or whatever you call it. And they're doing a 50-pound batch that they can pick out an ounce of. And that's a lot that you can get some really good look, even if you're on a bad run, you got a good ounce in there somewhere, And so,
for sure.
So it's really it's tough, but I enjoy the challenge. And I just, and since then I got introduced to other competitions and things like that. And, Saturday we won a cup for best gas OG chem category with the Yuck Mouth from Archive, which is a clone I bought from Archive. This wasn't even, all this hunting and stuff that I do to find these ones. And, and I won with a clone from Archive, and then.
Oh man. And there's something ironic there, but I get it.
Yeah. And it's like, but it's, it's really just, it's what will win is flavor and feeling. You can, because it's look, smell, taste, high. And I just focus on, or I feel that my strengths are smell and taste. And the look, smell, taste, high. Yeah, look, smell, taste. Smell and taste are my things. And the high is there. Some people don't connect with my sativa strains, and I get that. But the look, I would say that usually liquid nutrient people almost always beat me on the look, unless the judge likes the look of a good organic bud. But it's certainly different.
It is.
I will often I've been meaning or trying so hard to win a cup with my own strain. And a lot of mine are old school sativa crosses. I crossed most recently, or the only one that I actually finally won was a Black Widow Acapulco Gold cross that I made to like really, I wanted to beef up the Acapulco Gold, but get that real terpenoline heavy and just like uplifting, racy high, and I nailed it. You know, it took, I don't know,
Nice.
5 years to find the one. I went through probably 10 seeds a year. You know what I mean? So it probably took 50 seeds to find the one that I was going to keep, and I won it. But I won it by putting in a pre-roll, and I only got third place. So there's room for improvement. But
Fair enough.
to be able to win with a land-raised sativa and to have a strain that is my own was a real good. You know, it's validating that, you know, because I mean a lot of times people are like, what are you doing? Like, nobody wants sativas, and or you're never going to make it. You don't know how many times I heard you're never going to make it as a micro tier. That's never going to work. But and that's kind of one of the other things of wanting to, when you ask why did I grow, why do I enter these contests, and it's because how do I explain to everybody what I'm doing? You know, it tells a
Right.
story, and it helps me say, hey, look, you know, we're small and we're really focused on flavor and and smell and taste, and the feeling is really what we really want to focus on, and it shines through, and I'm super grateful, and I'm thankful to the judges. I'm thankful to people that have embraced our grow style, because I know that it's different. It looks different. It feels different. It tastes different. I know it does, and I, you know, I'll be the first one to tell you that it's not that it's better. I'm not saying that it's better. There's as many different styles as there are growers. So I feel really, really lucky to be able to win some of these cups, especially against people that I really look up to, you know, like some really, really good farms in this industry that I you know, and in gas, I mean, gas is where it's at. OG Kush, you know, and the gas category, like, to me, being in the Emerald Triangle in the early 2000s, when OG Kush came through, or at least the first time I saw it, it was like everything was kind of sweet, or I'm trying to think of the strains. There was like Snowcap and Trainwreck and Silver Haze and
Blue Dream.
Blue Dream was huge. And so, and then
Yeah.
like OG Kush comes through, and it's like, oh my God, like it, to me, OG Kush is probably the best strain ever, because it just blew I was like, oh my gosh, the heaviness and the gas. And I was like, oh my God, I loved it. And so to be able to have the gas category it felt good. I was
That's
like, I
super
like this
cool.
one, you know?
Yeah, I mean, OG Kush, I have so many fond memories of OG Kush. That, and also just some of the original like cookies packs that were coming out in the Bay Area. I have such fond memories of them just being some of the dankest smoke that I had at the time. And yeah, like to win a category like that, especially even now, like even winning a candies category is crazy, because there's
Yeah.
so many candies, right?
I was
And so
talking
like
about that this weekend.
to
It's so
win an
hard.
iteration, yeah, to win an iteration of a candy category, like you have to, and like the good candies, I don't know if you've experienced this, but they are a pain in the butt. Usually they're all floppy, they're stringy, all their little side branches are no bigger than like a
Yeah.
toothpick sometimes, but
Yeah.
the buds are like these fucking golf balls, so everything's flopping all over the place. But you know, you find a great candy, and like it smokes, it hits, the high is there, the look is there.
Yeah.
And so like you can check all these proverbial boxes, right? But to actually like, okay, so everyone's checking all five boxes. Great. Now you have the hard task of being like, okay, what's the best iteration? Because something like in a gas, or like or a sativa, I'd say specifically, like something like an equatorial strain,
Yeah.
to hit all of the categories, right? To check all the boxes, man, that's going to be tough. So you really need to knock a few of them out of the park, whether it be, like you were saying, the aroma profile, the flavor profile when smoked, or especially even like the high. I feel like with a good equatorial
Yeah,
strain, you can
totally.
just knock people on their butts and they won't expect it. And usually you get a nice win from something like that just on strength alone. But also, like you said, it's really hard to grow sativas in this market. One thing I always like to touch on is you can't charge more for a sativa even if you grew it a third of the time longer.
Dude.
So
Yeah.
like, and I know that, there's some old models that, like, I just talked with Chad Westport about this, like back in the Dutch coffee shops, they would charge based on the flowering time, not
Yeah.
based on the hype of that strain. They would actually, kind of pay homage to the grower by saying, look, they put 12 weeks into this flowering cycle, it costs 12x. Your 8 week only costs 8x. It's not the same. It doesn't cost the same amount of time to make it. So why should we charge you the same amount for it? I think that's a
Totally.
great model, for something like, if you, keep pushing for this open air cannabis market. I am hoping that there's people that have consumers all want what they want, right? And some consumers are going to say, I want a 14-week Panama Red. I don't care how much I pay for it. I want an
Yeah.
ounce of that, and they'll go for it. And so but you know, winning in the categories that you've won in, I'm sure also having bred so many strains and seen so many strains grown, that it's just really satisfying to like put something out there, be like, this is the work that I'm satisfied with. Let's see if other people are satisfied with it. And then to have people go, damn, that's the best, or, that's top 3 of this category. That's always just a really great feeling.
I mean, it is to, and it's, but you put yourself out there, and that's a vulnerable moment to be, just to say, hey, I made this, because
Yeah.
you're on the hook, and it's, and it, I mean, to, back to the way we grow, I miss and mess up a lot. Like, I know more about what not to do than what to do. I have more bags of seeds of not to grow than I do to grow. It's I hope another lesson people can get out of this is that don't be discouraged. Like, you're going to have bad runs, but it doesn't matter if you learn one thing off of each run. I try to write down off of every single run 3 things that I could have done better or learned every single
Smart.
time. And I feel like when I can't find those 3 things, it's gonna be I'll be like, oh, I'll let you know. I'll say, hey man, there's nothing I could have done better. Which we
I mean,
know,
that's almost like a panic point, right? Because then you're like, what did I miss?
yeah, totally, exactly. But it's just one of those things, like learning an instrument or a craft. Like, you'll never get there, and it's one of the greatest, for me, one of the greatest feelings, and is just having a passion that I will never master. There's no way, because you could go down the rabbit hole of just far red lighting, or
Right.
like sativa stuff. I wanted to touch on, 90. When I'm running an Acapulco cross for 90 days, it's like, people are like, oh, we want more of that. And I'm like, I'm only growing that one time a year, and I'm not making a profit off that. It's 100% because I want to have that in my jar for 6 months,
Sure.
so I'm not giving you half of it, or I'm keeping half
Yeah.
of it for myself. And, and we're only doing it once a year. So
Yeah.
that is, a lot of people don't, I thank you for bringing that up, because people don't understand that 90 days of flowering is, is
That's tough.
it's so much can go wrong. I mean, think about what can go wrong in 60 days, much less
Exactly.
an extra month. It's just like, man, and then it's just it's a month more of electricity. I don't know what your electricity bill is, but mine is really high, so another
Yeah.
month of electricity. So yeah, it's awesome, and I love the contest scene. It's really motivating. It's really humbling, because in this industry, a lot of times you get people that'll say, or not say, but it's, well, you feel it when you grow. Every run is just like the best run, but also next run is the best run ever. And it's just, when you
Sure.
put that time into it's not even cannabis, it's anything you build. If you really put your full effort into it and you really put the love into it, it feels good and it tastes good and it smokes good and you're just so invested in that time that it feels so good. And so it's hard to be like, man, but it's nice to see a perspective of someone else's perspective of what the hard
For
work
sure.
really is, because it's, it's you have to have a good baseline, but then you also have to hit your best when everybody else doesn't hit their best, is really what I've
For
noticed
sure.
is what it is. Because I don't hit home runs all year. I do
No.
12 runs a year, and because I run cycles, and they're not all winners, And so if the cup comes on the one that I didn't, and then I was talking about this after the show on Saturday, it's like, a couple of the winners are like, man, like I really knocked out of the park this round. I don't know what happened really exactly, but, and sometimes you win them and sometimes you lose them, and it's okay,
Yeah. I mean, I always hear you're only as good as your last run, and
Yeah.
there's a level of toxicity to that for the growers community where a it's a stressor, man.
Hmm.
And I know that you know this, like knowing that you're going to be judged off of your next round and your last round at all times is there's not really like a good state of balance that you can reach there. You always have to be striving to do better and to never make those mistakes and that you've made before. And it's a living plant, so mistakes are bound to happen. Plants do plant things.
Dude.
Maybe you get a little bit of extra rain in a year. Maybe you have a timer go down. Maybe you have a heater malfunction. All these different
So
things
much.
that are just like, I how how can you make it perfect every
Well,
time? You can't. It's not a factory.
it's not a
So
factory. We always joke that the intake managers, like when it's with some of the industry guys, our joke is, like, oh, what do you think they want? Like, what did you hear this store? Let's try to get in that store, and like, oh, what do you think they want? And we're like, okay, all they want is a strain that you've never grown before, and they want it to be the best strain that you've ever had. It has to test at 40% and all tops, and it has to, and
no bees, all
what's that?
purple.
Yeah, and all purple. And it's just like, it's like, when someone says, you'll get, wow, this is like the best stuff I've ever seen, and you bring them something else, and they're just like, oh, like, it's like, it's an agricultural product. Like,
Yeah,
you don't throw away all the apples, because, or I don't know, I can't really think of a good analogy, but what you're saying is it's the heaters go out and things happen, and it's we need support from the community and from the consumer, not to just be like, when you just say, oh, it's got to be like this, or perfect, and people are going to start spraying. I'm not start, people do, they just spray so that they don't have to deal with bugs and everything. And I think that's a whole other rabbit hole for another time, but
for sure.
it's that's where the quality gets compromised.
I totally agree. I feel like community outreach and and consumer education is so important, but due to
Yeah.
the legality of this plant federally still, and even more recently locally in all the states, there's still just this stigma, and I feel like the stigmas need to break before a lot of the education and the healing can occur,
Yeah.
because there's just that if there's a taboo nature about something, then it's a lot harder to just have an open and honest conversation about it, because there's going to be preconceived notions, there's going to be biases, there's going to be all these different things that people just step into that conversation already thinking or knowing, and so it is really tough still. But all the work that you're doing is so important, and we're kind of getting up here on time and running a little short today. So for all the listeners, we're going to do a part 2, because we didn't even dive into your growing style, more of the practices that you do at your farm, how you manage it. You have 2 farms, cannabis, commercial cannabis farms. You also have a produce farm. And it sounds like you do this with your partner, and maybe some little helping hands from your children as well.
Yeah, totally.
And so, I want to dive more into that in the part two, find out how you are able to manage that lifestyle, because the lifestyle of a farmer is never ending. Like you mentioned earlier in the show, there's always something to do, right? You can
Right.
always find something to do. You could bring 100 people to your 1 acre farm and have them work for a month and still have more stuff to do. And
Yeah.
so, Jason, I just want to really thank you for your time here and for being willing and open to talk about your activism, your thoughts on this plant and the growth of the community and the education of the community. I think it's so important. And I do like to do a couple little short wrap-up questions, so
Okay.
I'm going to hit you with them on this episode. And you've already answered one of them, I believe. But your favorite strain of all time, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that OG Kush?
Yeah, I mean, if it were a desert island situation, I would have to have OG Kush and then a landrace sativa, and that would be fine forever. And hopefully, I would have a male of both of them, so I could breed them while I'm trapped on my desert island, and just slowly through the
For
over
sure.
100 years, I could find out if I could get every single iteration and strain.
You'd have
Remake it.
everything at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, along the same thread of thought, who is your favorite breeder of all time?
Man, that is so hard. Oh
I
man.
know. But let's say if you had to restart a breeding project from scratch, you have no seeds, you have no cuts, no genetics whatsoever, and you can only choose one breeder and all of their work to start over, who would it be?
I th- I think Ziploc seeds, I think.
All right.
I think
First
that
mention of Ziploc on the show.
I
That's awesome.
think the guy just puts in so much time into his pheno hunts and everything. But I mean, I have to give a lot of honorable mentions to, like, I mean, I connect with Archive, this gas stuff. The gas stuff from Covert Genetics, olfactory genetics. I mean, there's like even, what is it, Compound Chris? That guy, that jet fuel gelato line that he put out was one of
Yeah.
the best breeding lines that I have ever seen anybody ever come up with ever. And
Yeah.
but we could talk about breeding all day too. So, I mean, there's so many honorable mentions. I'll throw some in next time maybe. I really appreciate. Oh, is there more questions?
Well, there's one more,
Okay.
just one more question. But, I do like that you're kind of priming yourself to think about it more, because maybe you can have a more succinct answer next time.
Yeah.
Like a well thought out, like, okay, I'm restarting my entire
Yeah.
farm from scratch. I'm taking everything out and I
Yeah.
need to be commercially viable after the first pheno hunt. Maybe take that, think about it, and we'll touch back on it next time.
Yeah.
But last question for you is, what is your most memorable cannabis related experience?
My most memorable cannabis related existence. It was, I mean, the first time I smoked,
For
and
sure.
I
With that
hear
music and
people.
everything. Yeah.
It was just the way that it seemed there was an entire world universe that existed that I was already in, that I just hadn't been able to see it that way, and it changed my life. And I hear people say they smoke and they don't get high, and I have no idea what they're talking about. If I ever smoked weed and didn't get high, I would probably just quit smoking. There's,
For
like,
sure.
I don't know what they're talking about, and I've never ever felt that way, and I feel lucky to have have a low tolerance or
You
whatever
you
it is.
just you have a hyperactive endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I mean, What a bummer that would be if I. 'Cause
Oh no.
I hear people say it, and I'm like, wow. I was like, I have never ever experienced that ever
For
once.
sure.
And I will take, if I start feeling like I'm getting uh, a tolerance, I will take a tolerance break just to
For
make
sure.
sure, because I want to get the feeling, man.
Yeah. For sure. I feel like that's I can understand that sentiment, and I empathize with that. I want to feel it. I want to feel my medicine, and
Even
it's
2 or 3
like the way.
days
Yeah,
works great.
absolutely. Absolutely. Or even just, for me, sometimes I'll just need to switch up what I'm smoking.
That
You
works
know,
very
it just
well.
can't be the same thing all the time. Well, Jason, man, this has been a wonderful conversation, and you've shared just so much insight into the life of someone who is out there doing it. Like, you are in this deep in it. It seems to be part of your whole life. I mean, you live on your farm. You
Yeah.
know, that's you can't get much deeper into it than that. And so I'm really excited and looking forward to our next conversation where we can dive into a little bit more of your practices. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate people like you that are sharing this information and helping us grow. And like I like to say, that's the way we grow. And again, Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to coming on and sharing some insights of just what I wasn't able to get easily, or the information I couldn't easily access without the internet and everything when I was younger. So yeah, I mean, if anybody's looking for, I'd like to also say, state_3 is our Instagram handle. If anybody needs help, always reach out with questions. And yeah, just stay bright and switch it up.
Yeah, keep
Thank
on
you.
growing, right?
Yeah,
For
keep
sure.
growing. Thank you so much. This is really good, and I look forward to coming back.
For sure. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.